you're a subscriber to my channel, you've probably already seen where I hinted at making some rod parts out of a Swiffer broom or a Swiffer Sweeper. If you are subscribed to my channel and you didn't know that this video was coming, you might look at your subscribe button when you go to one of my videos. On the subscribe button, you need to make sure that the bell icon is checked. That way you'll get notifications every time I post something or I upload a new video. If you're ever wanting to go look at some of these posts that I do outside of my regular videos, you can go to my homepage and click on the community button, go in there, and it will show posts that I put up in that area too. So I'm not necessarily suggesting you go out and buy a Swiffer Sweeper broom, and if you've already got one that you don't use, you might want to possibly think about doing what I'm going to show you here. I saved a bunch of these handles that I pick up at a thrift store where you buy stuff by the pound, and when you figure it up per piece, it works out to about 15 cents per section of the rod, which is really cheap. I'm going to show you how I made something for a fishing rod that I'm working on for my daughter, and I made it out of a section of this aluminum handle that comes off of those Swiffer Sweepers. The aluminum tubing on those handles is just about the right size for a reel seat. It's fairly thin walled aluminum, so it's not really heavy, and it's about the right diameter, and it's also really strong and rigid, so it will hold up well. You can pick up these inexpensive plate style reel seats on eBay. The ones that I've got were made in China. I ordered them direct from China, and I ordered several of them at one time, and I've used these a few times, and they're actually pretty good quality. I've also used the Fuji reel seats, and they're called a plate reel seat. If you're looking for the cheaper ones that come straight from China, you might search eBay and put in these words: metal reel seat deck. And for whatever reason, they list them that way, and it will pull up a bunch that you can pick from that way too. At 15 cents for a section of rod handle and a little over $1 for the reel seat, I can make a pretty nice looking reel seat setup for the rod that I'm building. So what I'm going to do is just take this reel seat and lay it on a section of this handle that come off of one of these Swiffer brooms, and I'm going to just eyeball it and figure out about what I want on a length for it. And I'm going to cut the handle with a tubing cutter that you can pick up at any hardware store just about that sells plumbing stuff. You can get one of these tubing cutters, and it'll make a nice straight clean cut through that. And you'll just want to go back and deburr it like I'm showing here. I'm using a deburring tool. You could use a file or sandpaper. You just want to make sure there's no sharp edges there that will cause you problems later on. So once I got the length cut like I wanted it, and because these are used pieces, they're not in the best shape, so I had to get some of the scratches out of them and remove the anodizing because I wanted a polished look on the final reel seat in the areas that are exposed, which isn't much, but I wanted to make sure the aluminum was polished up enough to where the part that does show would be shiny, and I just went ahead and did the whole thing because I wasn't 100% sure when I started how much that I wanted to cover up on this piece of aluminum in the completed reel seat. And I polished mine on a lathe, but you don't have to have a lathe to do that. You can do this by hand. If you're going to be painting it, you don't even necessarily have to polish it, and that was one thing I considered, was possibly painting it and then putting a clear coat over that. But I think you'll like what I came up with instead, and I'm going to show you how I built this reel seat. So instead of painting the aluminum, I decided to go ahead and just wrap the entire reel seat except for the very ends in the main thread color that I'm going to use on the rod guides. And I thought that would be a cool look because I would incorporate that exact color from the guides into the reel seat. In order to make it easier to work with this grip section by itself, I want to use a broken piece of rod blank as a mandrel, and I'm going to make up some tape arbors for the grip to slide onto. And I'm going to use just a little bit of super glue on one of those arbors. I'm just going to put it on one so I can get it loose when I need to, just to hold it in place so I can do my wrapping and drying and all that on this mandrel, make it a little easier to work with. Now, if you're going to wrap a reel seat like this, it takes a long time, and one of the things that I did was hook my rod dryer up to it, and it's not as fast as it would be if I had a power wrapper or if I was using my finishing motor or something along those lines. But I wanted to make really sure that I got everything packed in pretty tight because I didn't want any gaps showing through, but it's still time consuming. That just keeps you from having to use your hand to do all the turning. If you got a power wrapper, it wouldn't take too long, But since this is metallic thread, if you are using a power wrapper, you have to be a little bit careful with it and not go too fast, I would imagine. So once I had the entire length of the handle section here completely wrapped, I looked at doing this in epoxy because it levels so well, but I decided to try something a little different. And if you've seen my video about using the clear Gorilla Glue as guide finish for your wraps, you know that I think it makes a pretty good finish on threads. So what I decided to do was try to do this length and get it as level as I could using the Gorilla Glue, because it has a tackiness to it. It's real grippy, almost rubbery feeling. And to me, that would feel better on a real seat than just straight up epoxy that's a little more slick, especially if your hands are wet. There's a tackiness to it, almost kind of like the type of grippiness that leather has. It's a rubbery feeling, and even if your hands are wet, it still has a tackiness to it and your hands don't slip on it. So I thought that would really do well if I could get it to level out. And I mentioned in that video about using this stuff as a guide wrap finish that I didn't think it would do good over long decorative wraps, and I still don't, just because it doesn't completely level out. I mean, it gets really good and it gets really close to being level, but it's not. So on something like a decorative wrap, it would be a little more conspicuous, I think, than it would on a real seat. But if I could get it to level out fairly well and look good, I think there's enough going on by the time you put the plate reel seat on there and wrap it to this handle that it would kind of mask some of the unevenness. Well, I did get pretty good results with it, and it wasn't super easy to do. I had to spend a lot of time moving it around in the first about 10 minutes. And once I got it fairly level, I just left it turning on my rod dryer. I did not use steam from a heated cup of water like I did on the guide wraps, because I wanted it to do any leveling that it could possibly do while it was on the rod dryer. So I think you can tell it actually came out really good, and it's not dead perfect level. If you laid a ruler across it, you would see a few high and low spots. It's really pretty good, honestly, and I'm pretty picky about stuff, and to me this turned out pretty well. So I think I could recommend this to others if you have the patience to sit there and move the liquid around until it starts to set up. And I really like the way this stuff looks when it goes down. It's so clear and it's glossy, kind of like epoxy, but it has a totally different texture to it, and it really feels nice in your hand. So I think this is going to make a great finish for a real seat. We'll see how it holds up over time, but for now I'm really happy with the way this looks. So I'm going to go ahead now and just wrap the real seat on to the grip section. And I decided to wrap the real seat onto the grip using my trim band color, which is going to be a metallic silver. And I ran into a little bit of problem with the real seat wanting to stick up on one end. So I used a little trick that I learned from Palo Fishing. You might want to go check their YouTube channel out. I'd mentioned it in another video, and I'll put a link to that up in the right hand corner, a video I'd done about using rubber bands for rod building as clamps. And I had my method of doing it, but I found on Palo Fishing a way to do it that's a lot stronger of a clamping force, and I used that method using the rubber band in order to pull that other end of the reel seat down as I wrapped it, and that worked really well. So once I had everything wrapped as far as the plate goes, then all I had to do at that point was go back with some more of the clear Gorilla Glue over the threads that I used to wrap the plate reel seat down with. And this is the final result, and to me this is really neat looking, and it's definitely unique. You don't see this very often on a rod. I've seen plate reel seats on rods wrapped in different ways, but you don't really see one that's this decorative looking, in my opinion, or I haven't seen any. So I thought it turned out really neat, and I thought it might be something other people might want to try for themselves. You're really only limited by your imagination. You could paint the grip part, you could powder coat it, you could polish it and just clear coat it over the polish and it would look good. There's no limit to what you could do. You could do a decorative wrap on the real seat grip and then put your plate on top of that, even if you wanted to go that route. So I thought I'd throw that out there and just let everybody check it out and see if that might be something you want to try for yourselves. I think this one turned out really neat looking, and I think it's going to look really good on the finished rod when I get done with it. Y'all take care, and I'll talk to you later.